Yes, thank you. And hello, Mr. Drager. It seems like eons since we were actually in the same room together in February of 2020, which was when I was the school board liaison to the calendar committee. So I really enjoyed that experience. And I think we had 3 meetings before COVID stopped us short. But I want to share with my colleagues and refresh memories that experience of being on that committee with, I don't know, 30 different people representing not only religious, but I want to remind us that it's also cultural observances that we were looking into, not just religion. That committee worked really hard to voice and then give input on the calendars that came out as A and B. And at the time, I was in favor of calendar B, so it would be a clear end to the school year, and October would have the work day. Now, that's the only difference between A and B, is that October adds another PD day and June adds a slightly different end day to the year. When I look at calendar C, I've circled every place where there would be a change. There is a change almost every month. It removes all of these, maybe all of them, of the cultural religious observances we've identified to gain 2 instructional days. That is too big of an ask for me to give up all the hard work that went into getting all these religious and cultural observances. When I look at our neighboring counties who have already been observing religious and cultural observances, for us to walk that all back for 2 days is not worth it to me per community input. I think that I would propose to the superintendent, can we find more time in the summer? Where else can we add time? And I do agree having the days be all scattered, you know, like this past month with MLK and the snow and the work day, it felt very lopsided. And this was something that the committee talked about. But I really urge us not to throw away all the work from calendar A or B that put in all of these religious and cultural observances for the first, and we still have space to go. I'm okay with looking in the future at not tying spring break to religious holidays. But this year, if we're trying to honor the work that's been done, to scrap all that for 2 instructional days is not a return on that benefit, in my opinion. So I would support A or B. I'm pretty much up in the air about either. So thank you. Yeah, I want to say again, folks, this work to create calendars A and B was a watershed moment in trying to do what's best for kids in terms of equity with these holidays. And I recognize and I have advocated for the work that support staff needs, and that is a whole huge issue. But having policy without enforcing it and saying, well, let's rely on our policy about respecting when kids and staff need to take off, it's weak. And it's only going to keep us where we're at. We went to look at these dates for being off for cultural religious holidays because kids struggle and families struggle when they're forced to make choices. And one could even argue that that's traumatic when a kid has to deal with that. Do we get every voice? No. We tried to consider every holiday. We couldn't get to Lunar New Year. Asian American input wasn't as robust as I and others would have liked. But as Mr. Frisch said, you know, that's the nature of this work. It got us more forward. Part of this process also was to identify things that we should use as criteria in the future. I sent a whole list, and I'll dig it up again, about things to normalize what we think of when we create a calendar. So in remembering that the non-secular calendar dates, some of these holidays follow the lunar calendar, they're going to change every year. So we need to have, you know, criteria. And I want to say this, differences in the calendars A, B, and C is 2 days. Why is it an option to remove the observances of Diwali, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and Eid, 3 major religions, and not even touch holiday break? Why is 2 weeks of holiday break intact? Why can't we remove 2 or 3 days, still get Christmas Eve off? Why can't we take Thanksgiving Wednesday back? That was an option that was really great, but you know what? People probably aren't going to travel as much this year. I think there has been a failure to really look at really thinking about alternatives. And I'd like to invite Dr. Williams to speak. Lisa Williams, our Chief Equity Officer, to weigh in here on her thoughts, please.
I was trying to turn my camera on, but I'm having a bit of problem. One of the things that I would like to offer for your consideration as I listen to this conversation is that it is probably a good idea to figure out what you want to center. right? Are we centering the inclusion of the religious diversity of our student, staff, community, population in our decision making? And if that is what we're thinking about as we make these decisions, what decisions might we make? If we are centering the economic vulnerabilities of our staff, families as impacted by COVID, what decisions might we make? But here's the reality. Systems of oppression and marginalization are interlocking. They're not really distinguishable in the ways that we're talking about them. So part of why this isn't clean is that there will be, irrespective of what choice you make, there are going to be issues that are unintended consequences that we need to mitigate the negative impacts to the extent that is practicable in the decision making. But first, I think, it is unclear to me what the goal is in terms of how we will make this decision. And one group came to one set of conclusions because they were using a very distinctive center that was evident in the decision making. And now, as the superintendent has talked about, COVID has happened, different things have changed. People are in different spaces around vulnerability. And so the conversation has shifted. So the hard decision is, what do we want to center in this conversation? And then based on the decisions that come forth from our centering that, how do we mitigate impacts that are still pretty significant considerations in this process? So that would be my offering. Not making the conversation any easier or cleaner, but just giving you a way to think about how we might move forward.